probably a lot of you know, "Come thou fount of every blessing." And, it's a hymn that's been sung in churches for a long, long time. But there's a line in there that says, "Here I raise my Ebenezer." And I said to Mary, "Do you know what an Ebenezer is?" And she said, "No." And, we have these things that we proclaim. It's good to know what they are. And there was a point way back there that the Israelites went out to war with the Philistines, and they tried to do it on their own. God had led them through all these things. And then they said, "Okay, yeah, we got this now. We don't really need you anymore." And they actually brought out the Ark of the Covenant like it's a magic, weapon against the Philistines. And they just, we got it. We got the weapon. We're good. And they got defeated and actually wound up losing the Ark. They lost 2 battles, and they lost the Ark of the Covenant trying to do things themselves, trying to leave God out of the plans. And Samuel, the prophet at that time, went to God, but he also tells them they need to repent. That's part of what a prophet does. And they had another battle, and he had the assurance now that God's on their side. They did it the way they were supposed to, and they soundly defeat the Philistines. Samuel raises up a stone. This was a great big stone, kind of vertical, and it's a memorial. Ebenezer comes, it's actually 2 Hebrew words, and I make a lot out of words, but they're all we have sometime to understand with. And it means, it comes from Eben Hazer, which you can figure out how they got from that to Ebenezer if you want to try, but it means stone of help. And he raises this memorial, and the idea is to leave this so that people can see it, so they remember, here God brought help. Here God was with us. It's a reminder to them. It's a reminder to future generations. It's a proclamation that says, the people say, "What is that stone there for?" And they say, "Well, let me tell you. This is what the stone is there for. This is this memorial, this stone of help that reminds us." And it's one of the things when we lose the words, we lose things like this. This is not a bad thing for us to do, to plant these things in our lives to remind us. And we receive that help often, and then we move on to the next thing and we forget. So your word for the day is Ebenezer, but it is a stone of help. And the way he did it to me is he said, "So do you know what Ebenezer means?" I said, "No." And I said, "Tell me." And he says, "No, look it up." And and I haven't had time to look it up. So thank you. I relate. We're going to get to some things, today, but this is another, it's sort of a word thing and it's sort of not. Last week, when we talked about Jonah, who was in the belly of this great fish, he is having this experience. And near the end of that, he says something. He says, "Deliverance is from Yahweh," right? Now,
this is Jonah 2:9.
Jonah 2, thank you. It's Jonah 2:9. Deliverance is from Yahweh. Now, some of you I've mentioned this to, but you remember when the angel Gabriel comes to Mary and says to name the child what? Name him what? Jesus, right? Well, that name, that Hebrew name, is actually Yeshua, right? That's really the name. That's what he said. "You shall name him Yeshua." Sometimes they say Yeshua, but that's the Hebrew word. When you go back to this chapter, that 2:9, Jonah 2:9, where he says deliverance is from Yahweh, strangely, the word is Yeshua is from Yahweh. That's the same word. And it's no coincidence of wording. I know in a way it is, but if you don't want to say that that's one of the other sort of weird foreshadowings, that he, in the middle of this, proclaims Yeshua is from Yahweh. And we have Yeshua. The thing to remember is that is deliverance. And there's a reason why he was named deliverance. His naming, it's not like the angel says, and you shall call him Tim. Okay, it's more than just a name. It is about deliverance. And this is another one. I told you there were so many weird foreshadowings. I'm going to catch you up on one more and then I'll let it go. But there's a point where this storm hits and the sailors are frightened to death. They think they're going to die. They start throwing stuff off the boat so it'll ride higher in the water, and it's still getting worse. And do you remember where Jonah was? He's down in the ship asleep. Do you remember the encounter where the disciples are crossing the Galilee and the storm comes up and they think they're going to die and Jesus is asleep? These are not coincidences. There is so much foreshadowing of this. And I don't know why we need that, except maybe to be able to look back and say, wow, this plan has been around a long, long time. But we see these foreshadowings of the Messiah, of Jesus, of Yeshua coming all through this book. And the 3 days, that he spends wherever he is in this, where it says that the earth came up to cover him 3 days. You can't get around the fact. I mean, you can't deny the fact that there's something to this, that there is a connection between these. So with that in mind, let's try and move into the actual lesson.
So we're doing Jonah 4 today. And one of the things you'll see if, the whole purpose of this is that Jonah is more than a story for children. And almost all, I probably found one story of Jonah where they mention chapter 4. They always stop at chapter 3 because chapter 4 doesn't make sense for the children's story, one. So I'm going to put that as a precursor. But the other thing you wanted to do as a precursor is when we start chapter 4 is the idea of why or what Jonah was feeling when he ran to Nineveh, how we ran to Tarshish.
So sometimes when we do these studies, we will tell you something in the early part and you'll look at it and say, well, I don't see that. Or how do you know that? What makes you say that? Because I don't see it. We know the end. We've already been through it. And there are times we either have to skip around or we have to say some things and then you have to kind of trust us. We're gonna get to it later. So one of the things that comes up in the early part of Jonah, in a lot of studies, a lot of sermons, a lot of commentaries, is why did Jonah run away from God and head off for Tarshish instead of going to Nineveh? And about half the people will tell you that it's because Nineveh was the big mean kid on the block and Jonah was frightened. He didn't want to go to Nineveh because he's frightened of their might and their power. And I distinctly said, no, he wasn't afraid. Well, now we're going to hear why. All right. Listen to the first part of chapter 3.
4.
Jonah, however, was greatly displeased and he was angry. So he prayed to the Lord saying, "O Lord, is this not what I said while I was still in my own country? This is why I was so quick to flee towards Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in loving devotion, one who relents from sending disasters. And now, O Lord, please take away the life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live."
So there you have it. When someone tells you something in their own words, it's kind of good to, they say, this is why I did it. It's probably best to believe this is why they did it. And Jonah says, remember, he's seen that the people have repented. They believed the word he brought from Yahweh and they've repented. And he's mad about it. And he says, see, I knew this was going to happen. Isn't this what I told you when I was back, in my own country? This is why I was so quick to run off to Tarshish. I don't want you to let these people off the hook. And he's angry about it. But the main point is, why do sermons and commentators and all these people persist in saying that Jonah ran away because he was afraid to go to Nineveh, when right there it tells you he's talking to God and says, I ran to Nineveh, I ran to Tarshish because I just knew you were going to let these people off the hook and they don't deserve it. And I'm angry about it. He tells you why he did it. And that's why we said this in the first week about why he did it, because he tells us, he lets us know.
And I'm going to read
Well,
one.
Before we leave that, it's the next sentence that bothers me. So kill me.
Oh, well, this guy,
Where did he get that?
this guy is angry. And you know, here's one of the things though, and I said to Mary this week as we were studying, I almost kind of respect him for this, because we often don't admit what it is we're really saying. We sure don't admit it to each other. Sometimes we don't admit it to ourselves, and we pretend like, you know, God, I'm really concerned about these people, but, okay? Jonah is just pure. He just, now I don't agree with his sentiment, but he's actually saying, I'm mad at you. I'm angry about this. I think you're blowing it. I think giving these people a break, don't you know? And this is all implied, but we know enough of the history. These people have afflicted Israel, your people, and now you're letting them off the hook. And I'm mad about it. And sure, I understand it's disturbing, Gene, but it's pretty clear. And I have encountered too many people who were angry at God not to give this credence, not to just understand.
But he's saying to the extent, kill me.
Oh, kill me?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about that this week. That's something I personally can't understand, you know, so I am so mad at you that you've made the wrong decision. I'd rather die. And I said, that is something I can't understand, just like you were saying, Gene, and your answer to me.
What, which thing?
Oh,
Look
idea.
Huh?
No, look it up. Yeah. No, that it's like a terror or a
The
suicide bomber.
suicide bombers, I mean, we see that. We see people that are willing to go in and blow themselves up. If it hurts the other side, they are that full of hate. But we see it in a lot of respects like that. People get so consumed with anger and hatred that they're willing to harm themselves if that's what it takes. And you know, is he really saying, kill me? I don't know, but I know what he's doing is saying to God, I am so mad at you. You might as well, I mean, I can't believe that you're going to allow Nineveh. He kind of, I think, had his heart set on the idea that God's going to destroy Nineveh, right? That was good news. 40 days and you guys are toast. That seemed like a good thing. And now you're saying, you know, I know you said tell them to repent, but they weren't going to do it. And now you're going to do it. And he's just gotten through saying, I knew this was going to happen.
Well, and this is the second time he said, basically, I'm okay with dying. One time he jumps on, I mean, he tells the guys to throw him over the ship.
Are
must have
there echoes of Solomon and Ecclesiastes in this?
Yes.
Yes, there are. And this is the thing that we begin to see the more we study, is that these things are so interlinked. There is so much connection. The idea of it being inconsistent, I've almost gotten to laugh at, because there's so much consistency. But yeah, I mean, it says what it says. He says, I'm mad at you and you might as well kill me now. But this idea of negotiating with God, or, you know, come that stuff, have you ever known of anyone who said, if you just do this for me, I'll follow you forever. I'll do that. I'll never do this again. I will. I mean, you know, it happens. And what I love about this is we're dealing with people and we recognize these people. And sometime I hope we recognize these people in us, that we catch ourselves and we are able to say, oh, hey, wait a minute. I've seen this before and this is what I'm doing. So yeah, it's
The next line, verse 4, is set apart. And as you always say, there's no chapters and verses, but verse 4 of 4 is just one sentence. But the Lord replied, have you any right to be angry?
and there's a reason why it's set apart. And it's not just God speaking. This is a big thing and it just gets passed right over. I don't know about you, but there have been times where I have kind of gotten this message, you know, how does God relate to us? Can I explain it? No. But there's times where I've been reminded maybe I've been off in a place where I shouldn't be. And here is Jonah, as I said, railing at God. God had him thrown into the ocean. Jonah acknowledges, you threw me into the waves, even though the sailors did it. But he didn't give up on him. And when I told you before, there's this, I have this idea that there are times it's not a punishment, it's just you're going to Nineveh. You know, if this is what it takes to wake you up, this is what it takes. And here, rather than that, what would you say if you had a whole lot of power and somebody talked to you the way Jonah just talked to God? How dare you talk to me this way? You know, bailiff, remove him from the court, have your guards, you know what, haul him out, get him out of my sight. And here, this just calm expression, and this obviously is what Jonah got from this, is this expression that says, do you have any right to be angry at me? And the beauty of that, do we have a right? Last week, I talked about God being sovereign. Well, what does that mean to be sovereign? It means he has the right. And he's saying, if I choose to pardon Nineveh because they repent, do you even have a right to be angry at me? And what you see in this, to me, is an instruction. This is God trying to wake him up and say, Jonah, you know, do you have a right to be angry? And then comes the response, and it just kills me.
I'm sorry. Is the text, the original text, the word right as in American right? Or is it?
I spent a lot of time in the original text, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that is what it looks like. And it is basically that. It is the sort of thing, when we say the word Lord, they say Adonai, but a Lord is someone that you know, has the power of life and death over you. And it is a right, you know, there's no Bill of Rights that with God exactly. But what I did, and why last week talked so much about sovereignty, is because this is coming. Because God's giving him a reminder, you know, you call me Lord, you call me Adonai. Do you really have a right to be angry with me? But there's more to it than that, Gene, because it has to do with, well, we'll see it later, but you're gonna see later. Let's go on.
Then Jonah left the city and sat down east of it, where he made himself a shelter and sat in its shade to see what would happen to the city. I'm gonna stop there because I first said, what do you mean? What's gonna happen to the city? They already repented, and so he knows what happened to the city. But
I don't know. It says that God relented. It seems that Jonah was, because Jonah's still angry. Remember this, Jonah is still angry at God, and maybe he's hoping God will relent of relenting. You know, maybe there's a chance that they're going to mess this up, and they're still going to, I mean, it seems, because of what comes after this, pretty clear that Jonah is going to sit up and see what happens on the 40th day. Maybe there's still a chance for these people to be wiped out. And he makes
shelter.
It's what's called a sukkah. They have a holiday called Sukkot, but it's something, if you're making a shelter out of sticks in the wilderness in that part of the world, it's not going to be you know, like a really good even tent, much less. But they make it out of sticks and stuff, and it's a shelter. And he's up there, up above in the hills, watching, I think, without a doubt, hoping that this place still gets wiped out.
So the Lord God appointed a vine, and it grew up to provide shade over Jonah's head to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was greatly pleased with the plant.
So here we have the Lord appointed a vine. Back when the great fish comes up, it says he appointed a great fish. And I told you then that that word has to do with sort of enumerating. It gives, if you get back to the words and what the intent is, it really has a big connotation that this is a singular thing. He did, and you know what, people take that word for the plant and they say that's a castor bean, because castor beans have big old leaves, they grow pretty quick. And everybody wants to give some rational explanation of something. When it says he appointed a plant, it's the same word as he appointed a great fish. And that should kind of clue us in. This is not a normal thing. And this thing springs up overnight. Jonah doesn't plan it. He doesn't tend it. He doesn't deserve it. This gene is what we always come back to. This is hesed. This is grace. This is a gift, unlooked for and undeserved, and Jonah receives it. And he likes it. We like mercy when it's directed at us. We don't really love mercy all the time when it's directed at some, but Jonah, yeah, this is great. This is perfect for me. He likes it.
And it's going back on the side of the sovereignty thing. What we do to this story, though, we don't want to believe that a big fish could have swallowed Jonah. He appointed that fish. That it's a one-time thing. This is a sovereign God who created the universe, you guys. He could create a big fish. Could he create a plant that grew overnight? Yes, he could create a plant that grew overnight. But you read commentaries and they're trying to figure out what plant could grow overnight. I mean,
It's a castor bean.
they're missing the point. It's God, you guys. God created us. He could create a plant that grew overnight. And it doesn't have to be a castor bean plant.
I would like to say that if you try and point something out, to a dog, the dog looks at your finger. Okay, it's just frustrating. They instead of looking at what you're pointing at, they focus on your finger. People focus on the wrong stuff an awful lot. And in this case, they focus on a plant growing up like this, and they have to, they're looking. It's not about a fish and it's not about a plant. This part that's going on right now, trust me, for now, we'll get to, but this is an instruction to Jonah. This happens very clearly as part of an instruction to Jonah. God has not given up on him. So let's now move to.
Well, and one other thing I want to say with that is that God could have gotten his purpose of getting the people from Nineveh to repent. If Jonah didn't want to do it, he could have used somebody else. This is God. He could have said, okay, Jonah, you're a lost cause. Get thrown into the ocean, die. I'll go on to the next prophet. I mean, the other wonderful thing about this is God didn't give up on Jonah.
It is.
I mean, God wanted Jonah to do this, and God's saying, okay, you didn't get it the first time. I got a fish for you, spent 3 days here, and now you're still not getting it, but I'm not giving up on you. So how did he not give up on him?
But God didn't need Jonah at all.
No, don't.
He could have gone direct to the people.
Nor me. And that's sort of the message that's left for us, isn't it? He doesn't give up on us. And if he chooses to use you, you should, probably consider being used.
When dawn came the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered.
Do I need to tell anybody that appointed is the same word as all the others? And this plant that he was giving him comfort, he has now taken away. This is an instruction, though, as we'll see.
As the sun was rising, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head so that he grew faint and wished to die, saying, "It's better for me to die than to live."
Here it is again.
He appointed.
This guy's sort of angry, don't you think? I mean, can we can accept that? Jonah's angry. And when you get like that, everything is bad, everything's going wrong for me. That's the place Jonah's at. Let's just go that.
Oh, and you also want to say something about the east wind and the sun bearing down on Jonah's head, that this idea, this is probably how he could have gotten to Nineveh too.
How's that?
Oh, that he was gonna wipe out Nineveh. Anyhow, I'll go on.
Oh, and there is something there, and the point escapes me. Maybe I'll
Okay.
come back.
Then God asked Jonah, have you any right to be angry about the plant? I do, he replied. I'm angry enough to die.
There it is. And I do remember the point on the east wind. This is an east wind that is so scorching. And we locked our keys outside of or inside the car on a summer day in Israel. And I didn't get to the point that I thought it would be better for me to die, but I can't say I was very far from it. Okay. It was horrible. I mean, it's
And we had
just
3 kids.
it's horrible. But what's happened here is you see that this sort of calamitous hot east wind has borne down on Jonah. And you have to see, I mean, that's what was going to happen to Nineveh, isn't it? And he's experiencing pretty much the same thing as that. And he hasn't gotten the point yet. But this happens and he says, it would be better for me to die. And you want to read it again?
Then God said to Jonah, have you any right to be angry about the plant? I do, he replied. I'm angry enough to die. But the Lord said, you cared about the plant, which you neither tended nor made grow. It sprang up in a night and perished in a night. So should I not care about the great city of Nineveh, which has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well?
Are you angry about the loss of the plant, Jonah? I am. Do you have a right to be mad at me? This is another time. Do you have a right to be angry about this? I do. That's pretty bold, right? At least it's honest. But do you see how sometimes we want to make somebody see how they're acting. And we try and make them see, well, what if this happened to you? What if it happened to you? How would you feel about it? And in this case, this idea of this unbearable pain, that's what Jonah wants to happen to the Ninevites. And so he teaches him this lesson with this plant that you receive comfort, Jonah, that you didn't deserve. You didn't tend the plant, you didn't plant it, you didn't tend it, you didn't deserve it, and yet you got mercy, didn't you? Can you see how this is a teaching? He is actually showing Jonah, look, when it happens to you, you want mercy. And he says, should you be angry at me? Do you have a right? And Jonah just says, I do, I am. I'm angry at you over this still. And so the response that he gets, how does God talk to a prophet? I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, we can go into a long discussion about that sometime. But the message that Jonah gets is, you are angry about a plant. Shouldn't you're concerned, not just angry, but you're concerned over a plant, the death of a plant, because you liked it. Shouldn't I, as God, be concerned over a great city like Nineveh with over 120,000 people who don't know their right hand from their left? And that means they haven't known what they're doing. And in that comment about not knowing your right hand from your left, these Ninevites, I kind of have to see one of the last things that Jesus says on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. God forgive them because they don't know their right hand from their left. I mean, it is that concept. And when I tell you, we keep seeing these foreshadowings, these similarities, there it is. And do I not have, oh, no, that's actually, this is something else, but the last of this, he says, I'm God, you're here, you're worried about a plant. Shouldn't I, as God, be worried about a city of 120,000 people who just flat didn't know better? That's why I brought you here. And it ends.
And we're going to get back to that.
What,
We're going to we're not going to talk about the end right now. Go ahead.
that indicates to me, Jonah had no idea, like I said, he professed it, but he had no idea.
Well,
And the beginning says, the Ninevites' lifestyle have risen up to me. And I'm sending you, Jonah, to go get him straight.
yeah,
And he takes off. So all these years for Jonah, seeing, for lack of a better word, evil, didn't bother him. He was only concerned about himself. And the same thing with these plant.
from time to time, Gene, you talk about these people that we study. And like now, you say Jonah didn't really understand hesed, which is mercy, which is grace. And you're correct. What should happen is for us to see ourselves and realize
We don't understand his said.
we do the same thing. That's why a lot of this stuff is here for us.
Which I think is why sentence 4 is disjointed to make the point. I'm going, listen to me, I'm gonna teach you something.
Yeah, yeah. We've got just enough time, I think, because I want to tie this together with something out of the New Testament. And in it, you can see some real parallels. Do you want to read it?
So we're going to go to Matthew 20, the parable of the workers. For the kingdom of heaven
This is Jesus speaking, by the way.
sorry, Jesus is teaching. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for the vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into the vineyard. About the third hour, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. You also go to my vineyard, he said, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour and did the same thing. About the 11th hour, he went out and found still others standing around. Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing, he asked. Because no one has hired us, they answered. So he told them, you also go to my vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, call the workers and pay their wages, starting with the last ones hired and moving on to the first. The workers who were hired about the 11th hour came and each received a denarius. So when the original workers came, they assumed that they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. On receiving their pay, they began to grumble against the landowner. These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the scorching heat of the day. But he answered one of them, friend, I am not being unfair to you. Did you not agree with me on 1 denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the last man the same as I gave you. Do I not have the right to do as I please with what is mine? Or are you envious because I am generous?
So,
Wow.
vineyard owner. There are people who are day laborers. They literally, we have them today, big cities, you have places, Gene, you're shaking your head. Yeah, these people don't have regular jobs and they go to a parking lot a lot of the time and they stand there and somebody comes by and says, you, and you get work, you get to eat today. That's what's going on here. And the vineyard worker goes out and finds these people hanging around that need work, that need money, says, I want you to come to my vineyard and you're going to work for me today. And I'll pay you a denarius. I'll pay you regular wages instead of trying to but the vineyard owner is the one in position to do that. And it is something bestowed from above to below, which is one of the characteristics of Hesed. But they go out and they start working. That's about 6 o'clock in the morning. About 9 o'clock in the morning, the vineyard owner is out doing whatever, and he sees some more people. And he says, hey, what are you standing around for? Get on over to my place, and I'll pay you a denarius for 3 hours less. And then a second time, or another time in the day, finds more people. I think it's around noon.
Mhm.
And he says the same thing, get over and you'll eat today too. I mean, you'll have work and you'll eat. But finally, what's known as the 11th hour, for us, that would be 11 o'clock at night. But since their day starts at sundown, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You have people who have been out working in the heat of the sun since 6 o'clock in the morning. And at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there is only 1 hour of work left. And he says, get on over to my place and go to work for me. And then it's time to hand out money at the end of the day, because that's the way it's done with day laborers. And he pulls up those people who came at 5 o'clock and he hands them a denarius. And you know, these other people are thinking, oh man, if they got a denarius for an hour, I got some money coming, you know, I'm gonna buy something extra at the end of the day. And then he goes to the next ones and he pays, you know, that were at whatever, noon, 3, and he pays them a denarius. And all of a sudden you can hear the grumbling start. Hey, wait a minute.
This isn't fair.
And they began to get, you know, loud and grumble. And they say, let me see if I can, the workers receive the denarius. On receiving their pay, these people who had been there since 6 begin to grumble. And you can kind of understand it, right? Because that's how we think. What do I hear today in this society so much? I just want to, you know, get ill. This isn't fair. It's not fair. And that's what they're grumbling. That's what they're whining about. This is not fair, because they assumed they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And they're grumbling. And he says, they only worked 1 hour, and you've made them, this is important, you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden in the scorching heat of the day. Now, this is the way the Jews had come to think. In fact, they had decided, and we have learned so much that we, by nature, believe they're chosen people, and God doesn't like the Gentiles. And yet in Jonah, we see one of his prophets being sent to this harsh Gentile city to preach a message of repentance and deliverance, right? Deliverance. Well, that's what these people are saying. This is the good son in the parable of the prodigal son. What do you mean you're going to throw a party for him? You don't throw a party for me. He ran off to Vegas and spent all his money on whatever they do out there. And I stayed here.
It was a good son.
And was the good son. And I have actually, you know, encountered too many people who get angry at God and they say, after all I've done for you, after all I've done for him, and he lets this happen to me.
In verse 13, when the vineyard owner answers, he answers one of them, friend, I am not being unfair to you. Friend,
it's in there for a reason. I am humbled, I'm amazed at some of these parables that we have recorded. But the vineyard owner turns to these grumbling workers and says, friend. Now I'll ask you again, if you're the vineyard owner and you've done this and these people start saying, you know, stuff about you, chances are you're going to toss a denarius at them and say, get out of here. And I'm not hiring you again next time. You know, how dare you talk to me like that? He's the vineyard owner. And if they don't have him, you know, their chances of getting work are pretty slim. And instead, what we're told, the words that Jesus used here is friend. If you've ever known Gene, you've known day labor. I can see you shaking your head. Picture someone going by and picking out day laborers today, and at the end of the day, talking to them as friends, as equals. It's not going to happen. And yet the example we have here, this reference to God, and I don't know, maybe it'll happen sometime. Maybe I should never say never, but this reference we have here is the vineyard owner saying, friend,
I am not being unfair to you. Did you not agree with me on 1 denarius?
Take your pay and go. And maybe that sounds harsh, but that's not the point. He says, look, we agreed to a denarius. I haven't done anything to you. I've given you just what I promised. I haven't done anything to you. He says, you know, I want to give this last man the same as I gave you.
Does that word friend indicate to us that he's at a whole different level? He's not talking about this earth.
At the Last Supper, John records, and this is one of my favorite things, you'll hear it again. But Jesus talking to the 12, and he says, I no longer count you as servants, I count you as friends. It's the same word. I count you as friends, because a servant doesn't know the master's business, but now you know all of mine. And he calls them friends. Yes, it is very much the same thing that we see later on when he talks to the 12. So he says, do I not have the right to do as I please with what is mine? Or are you envious because I'm generous? You're upset because I'm generous to these other people. Is that the problem? But the big one, back up, don't lose it. Do I not have the right to do as I please with what is mine? Now, it's not the same word because one's Greek and one's Hebrew. I don't know, but this is the same idea. It's exactly the same thing as we go back to Jonah, and he says, don't I have the right? Do you have the right to be mad at me because I choose to bestow grace and mercy on these other people? And the converse that's implied in that is, I do have the right to do it. You don't have the right to be angry about it because they aren't yours, they're mine. Yeah.
So we go back to Jonah 4, and two things here. First of all, why you now know why Jonah 4 isn't in kids' stories, because this, I mean, it's a hard lesson to explain to a kid, and it's a hard lesson for us. But the other thing is, it just sort of ends here. You know, I'm somebody who watches a movie or a sitcom or a murder mystery, whatever we're watching, and I'm like, oh, I don't want it to end here. I want to know what happens to these people. I want to always know the rest of the story. And here, I mean, this book ends with, who cannot tell their right hand from their left hand, and many cattle as well. And it's like, I mean,
You don't know if Jonah got the message.
you don't know if Jonah got the message. And it seems like, I want to say, it seems like someone like lost the end of the story, because I want to know how it ends.
First of all, we'll go back to when we said this can only be one of three things. Either Jonah wrote this himself about himself, or he told someone about this and they wrote it, or it's all just make-believe, right? I got to rule the third one out. And I told you, I don't really care. This is an account of Jonah. I would suspect that if Jonah didn't get the message, he probably doesn't bother recording this story, but we aren't told. And the question is, pardon me, why not? Why aren't we told? And I'll just tell you a story. Years ago, when I was young and in business, I was watching TV, and there was a commercial, and it said, this week at HEB, and something went wrong with the video, and it ended right there. And I'm sitting there realizing I wasn't paying attention. And then all of a sudden, this thing ending like up against a wall the way it did. And the thing that stuck in my mind is HEB. I mean, and I have said, hey, I could use this in my business. At the time, nobody would run commercials shorter than 30 seconds. I tried. But the point is, ending this here is supposed to make us think. We're supposed to see, you know, how did this come out? The fact is, we all know how it should have come out.
Jonah should have got the message.
Right? You know that. You don't, and the fact that it stops makes you stop and wonder. And at that point, what should happen is we think, surely he got the message after all this. And it's only a short jump from there to realizing maybe I should get the message from time to time. Maybe I should, you know, I should learn from this and not be so hard-hearted about things as I am.
Scott, we have two different Bibles because I write all over mine, and it just always bugs him that I write over mine. So nobody, and I once picked up the wrong Bible and wrote on his. And so that wasn't good. But on this one, I underlined verse 4. Have you any right to be angry? And to me, that's the thing that I can't forget or shouldn't forget. I can forget.
This is Matthew, by the time we get to Matthew, centuries later,
Right.
and he ends it with the same way. He says, hey, first shall be last, and the last shall be first, where's that? That's the point. Back of a Jonah says, Jonah, you're out of your league. This is mine.
Above your pay grade.
Yeah.
Yep, that is one of my favorite things, because I have to come back to that often. People want to know all of this stuff. Well, how does God go about that? And why would he do that and everything else? And there's some things that are, what about these people that maybe haven't heard the message? It's above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't need to know. What I get is this instruction that says I should probably get about my business. We've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to share one little bonus thing with you that came out of this study, because Jonah, it's recorded back there that he goes to the king of Israel at the time, who was a lousy king and a bad guy and he makes this prediction. You're going to be used by God and you're going to have some big victories. You're going to expand the kingdom of Israel once again, because it has been sort of closed in, and you're going to expand it and you're going to have these victories. And Jeroboam too, it happens, and he sort of takes credit for it. In fact, not sort of, look how mighty we are. We expanded the kingdom of Israel. And so he takes credit. And after having sent Jonah with the first prophecy, he sends another prophet named Amos. And Amos comes along and he says, and I could read that, but he says, basically, you've blown it. He says, Jeroboam, the king, will die by the sword, and Israel will surely go into exile. And this is one of the messages that prophets get sent with from time to time. And it's the reason why prophets get killed. They're known for that. But he makes this doom prediction because Jeroboam, rather than following God and serving and giving him credit, takes the credit, and he just turns away from God. Now, the high priest at the time is a guy named Amaziah. And Amaziah says to Amos, go away, you seer. Flee to the land of Judah, which is the northern kingdom. Flee to the land of Judah, earn your bread there. We don't want to hear this prophecy. It says, get out of here, go up there and do your prophesying there, as if not hearing it is going to keep the prophecy from coming true, right? Got you so far. And he says, never prophesy at Bethel again, because it is the sanctuary of the king and the temple of the kingdom. So this is the official palace. This is the county courthouse, right? And as such, it's sacred. And we don't want to hear your foolishness anymore. And then comes the response from Amos. And I love this. I mean, I've never consciously read it before, but Amos fires back this official who says, you need to get out of here. And Amos says, I was not a prophet. Amos replied, nor was I the son of a prophet. I was a herdsman and a tender of fig trees. But the Lord took me from following the flock and said to me, go prophesy to my people in Israel. And I just love that. I mean, I love it, because this guy is so sanctimonious. He is so full of his own power. And Amos, rather than standing up and, flexing his muscles, he says, look, I'm nobody. I wasn't a prophet. I was never a prophet before. I know what to tell you. I'm not the son of a prophet. I'm nobody. I tended sheep and goats, and I tended fig trees. But the Lord God, Adonai Yahweh, lifted me up and said, took me away from the flocks and said, go prophesy to my people in Israel. And that's all the explanation they get. But I love what that attitude that says, you don't have to believe me. I'm nobody. I'm not going to try and impress you with my credentials, with my PhDs, with my graduation from the seminary. You don't have to listen to me. The problem is you're not listening to me. God picked me up and said, go do this. And unlike Jonah, he went and did it. And Jeroboam the king died by the sword. Israel was surely led into exile. And the things he said absolutely came true. So, anything else?
So when we started this, we talked about that Jonah was one of the 12 books in the minor prophets. Remember, minor prophets only meant those books were shorter, not that they were less important prophets, and that there was 4 major prophet books that had their names on it that was long. So anyhow, we started going down another rabbit hole of Elijah. And because we've all heard of Elijah being a prophet, and I'm thinking he's not a minor or a major. He doesn't have a book named after him, big or small. And yet he is mentioned a lot in the New Testament in some very unusual ways. And so we're going to study Elijah next, and I will send out some references. So he's in 1st and 2nd Kings, but he's also in the New Testament. He's in Revelations, I guess. He's all over the place. And so we're going to study Elijah, and it gives you an idea that all the major prophets don't have books named after him either.
Yep. So, and there's some pretty cool stuff in there, but there's one thing I'll give you a preview on something. A lot of you, maybe most of you, are familiar with God speaking with a still small voice. You may not even know where it comes from. It's part of this story of Elijah that God speaks with a still small voice. I promise you, when we get to there, it's one of my really favorite things. You're going to hear something that I bet you've never heard before about that section, about the still small voice. And I would suspect most of you will be wondering, hey, wait a minute. Why did nobody ever point that out to us before? There's some good stuff coming in the study of Elijah. God, we see in this story of Elijah that you've left, Jonah. I'm sorry, correct me in my prayer. We get to do that. We get to talk to God. It's a conversation. And he knew my own, but it's okay. This story of Jonah that you left, we see the foreshadowings of the Messiah, Jesus, that you sent for us. And we see that your plan has been from the beginning, just like you tell us. And we see in those foreshadowings the beauty of the plan and the difference that when Messiah comes, things change. And we see also in this story about Jonah, ourselves, and the things we do, rather than being obedient, rather than having care for your children, we carry our pride and we carry our angry and we carry our justification with us as if we're entitled to it. And if we learn one thing, if we can learn one thing from this, my prayer is that we would be reminded that you are sovereign, and that we don't have the right, even though you indulge us so much and so often, we presume to think it's our right. Teach us, has said God, as we go this week. Amen.
Okay, you guys can unmute yourselves. There you go.
I saw a comment there earlier. I wish we could talk while the room rumbles. And I wish I had a solution for you on that. I have done more with equipment to try and see what I could do about it. It's just not happening in a room like this. So we always like hearing from you, but I can't solve that. Maybe we'll wear headphones and mute the room.
I got a question for you, Scott. When's our next get together all together in person? We're gonna do something coming up anytime in Easter, around Easter season?
We got. I'm going to get you to repeat that as I turn the volume up. All right.
Try again.
Try again.
Okay. Are we gonna try to get together as a group anytime in the next few months? Or?
Are we gonna try? Yeah.
I'm going to take that as a request. Yes.
Yeah.
Say it's.
No, I'm just curious.
Yes, we'll figure it out.
I like requests like that. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, it seems like we've got to figure a way to do it. So, okay. I don't think
we're gonna be in Chicago. We're gonna be in Chicago for Easter for the grandbaby, or we're gonna be at Rockford for the grandbaby. So
at Easter.
At Easter. So if we do something
We're hoping it's not Easter.
during Lent, but I think, well, she didn't,
Last year we hosted a Seder and it was really cool, but it's a lot of work. And I don't know now that we're
don't do that. No. Let's do meanie weenies and lemonade or something like that. Just a chance to get together.
request, acknowledge, we'll see what we can do. We'll start working on it. I think it's a good idea.
I have more grandbaby pictures.
Yeah, you got some more grandbaby pictures, Mary?
Let me see if I can pull up another one. Let me see. How do you pull up? Did you pull up more than one?
Well, it didn't pull them up because that app only, but if there was an arrow that lets you click and step through them, try it, pull that one up.
Okay.
Is your daughter doing well though? Is she?
There, okay, there we go there.
Yeah.
There we go. That's playmat time.
Oh,
And this one is, let me see if I can I get?
They may see it,
Can you see that whole one or are you blocked?
unshare one of the others.
We see 3 of them.
Okay, that's.
We see a pup. They got like a little
Kids'
Labrador
favorite
retriever or
book
what?
that I read to them, and Julie, I know you'll know it, was I Love You Forever.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be Amanda's book, and Amanda was reading I Love You Forever to Finley, and Finley, looks like she was looking towards the book the entire time, which was just so special. And by the time we finished, finished reading I Love You Forever, Amanda and I both were crying.
Oh yeah, of course. It's a tearjerker book. It's a tearjerker book.
Anyhow, it was a good time. It was lots of fun.
And what a beautiful baby.
yes.
Thank you.
So she doesn't have any blood pressure issues. That all went away at birth.
That's true. She's fine. The baby's she wrote me this morning, is having some digestive issues, and they think she's breastfeeding, but she's allergic to the formula that they're supplementing with. And so they've told her that they have to find another one or so anyhow, and Amanda's just at a month is at that, am I doing it right stage? So, and she's tired. So.
Well, she'll be tired forever. So you gotta get used to it.
Anyhow, and Diane, I was hoping to see you when I get to Raleigh, but my schedule is nuts. I get in at 11 o'clock tonight, and
tonight.
Yes, and they want me someplace at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning with my computer, and then Women's Initiative, and then Battles of the Band. Like I said, to tell you I am not looking forward to this trip is an underestimation. But
Well, do you think you have an evening free to just meet for a glass of wine in the evening, or just let me know.
Okay, I appreciate it. I would have loved to get together, but I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm staying at the Marriott Residence Inn, and we've taken over the convention center, and so
Okay.
anyhow, that's where.
All right. Well, let me know if there's a day that works out that you could get free for a couple hours in the evening. I could come and meet you in Raleigh on a nice day, and it doesn't work. It's no big deal, but we'll try.
Well, I want to hear, Julie, when do you leave?
We leave, the ship leaves Saturday afternoon. So I probably won't be all Sunday, so
Okay.
I'm gonna miss, I'll have to get
Well, we'll
watch the-
record it. So Virginia will be here in person next week, which will be good. So every week it's something different. Yay. You guys have a good week and look for the
You
recording.
too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Also, bye-bye.